Police came to Edward Caniglia's home to check on him. He left in an ambulance, then they took his guns. He says they had just promised they wouldn't. 6 years later, every justice of the United States Supreme Court said the police got it wrong. Not 5-4, not 6-3, all 9. This is the story of how a rule written for a broken-down car ended up inside a man's house. August 20th, 2015. Edward Caniglia and his wife Kim were arguing at their home in Cranston, Rhode Island. The argument got heated, and at some point Edward did something that would shape the next 7 years of his life. He went to the bedroom, came back with a handgun, and put it on the dining room table. Then he asked his wife to shoot him and get it over with. She didn't. She left and spent the night at a hotel. A man in real distress said something alarming, and his wife got herself out of the house. Nobody here is a villain. That is exactly what makes the legal question hard. The next morning, Kim tried to call home. Edward didn't pick up. So she did what most people would do. She called the police on the non-emergency line and asked them to check on him. That is called a welfare check. Officers go to a home not to investigate a crime, but to find out whether someone is all right. Departments do this constantly. It is one of the most ordinary things an officer does. Officers from the Cranston Police Department met Kim outside and went with her to the house. Edward was there. He was alive. He came out and spoke with them. And here the accounts split. A sergeant described him as agitated and angry. 2 other officers described him as calm, cooperative, normal. That disagreement was never resolved. Hold on to it, because it is the kind of thing a trial is supposed to sort out. The officers wanted him to go to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. Edward did not want to go. Eventually he agreed, and according to Edward, he agreed on one condition: that the officers would not take his firearms. An ambulance took him to the hospital. The Supreme Court's own summary of the case says he went, only after the officers allegedly promised not to confiscate his guns. And once he was gone, officers went into the house and took 2 handguns, along with magazines and ammunition. Now, that word allegedly is doing real work, and we are going to come back to it at the end. Because whether that promise was ever actually made is a question no court in this story ever answered. What is not in dispute is what happened next. They did not have a warrant. A warrant is written permission from a judge. An officer explains under oath why they need to search, and the judge decides whether that reason is good enough. It is the difference between the government deciding on its own that it can come in and somebody outside the government agreeing first. Nobody got one here. There wasn't time. And more to the point, the officers did not believe they needed one. And it is worth being fair to them for a second. From where those officers were standing, a man had put a gun on his own table the night before and asked his wife to shoot him. Now they were being asked to walk away and leave that same man alone in that same house with those same guns. Get it wrong, and somebody dies. That is a genuinely hard position. But the question was never whether their instinct was decent. It was whether the Constitution let them act on it without a warrant. Edward was evaluated at the hospital and released the same day. He wanted his guns back. That turned out to be harder than handing over a receipt. His lawyer formally asked for them in October. That did not get them back. So in December, he filed a lawsuit. The guns came back after that, not before. He sued the officers in the city, arguing that the entry into his home and the seizure of his property broke the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment is the rule against unreasonable searches and seizures, and for 60 years, the court has repeated the same idea about it. At its core is the right to retreat into your own home, and there be free from unreasonable government intrusion. Everywhere else, the rules bend. Your car can be searched on probable cause. Your garbage on the curb is fair game. The home is where the bending mostly stops. It is the one place the amendment was really written about. But the police had an answer, and their answer came from a car crash in Wisconsin in 1973. A man named Chester Dombrowski crashed his car while drunk on a rural highway. He was an off-duty Chicago police officer. He was hurt and taken to the hospital. His wrecked car was towed to a private service station and left sitting there, unguarded. The local police believed Chicago officers had to carry their service revolver at all times. Dombrowski did not have his. So, they opened the trunk looking for the gun so that it would not end up in the wrong hands. They did not find a gun. They found blood-stained clothing, and it helped convict him of murder. He argued that the trunk search was unconstitutional. In Katie v. Dombrowski, the Supreme Court disagreed and allowed it. The court was describing police work that has nothing to do with catching anyone, directing traffic, clearing wrecks, checking on people. Lawyers gave that work a name: community caretaking. And the idea behind it is real. Officers spend enormous stretches of their job doing things that have nothing to do with investigating a crime. Sadie described that work as entirely separate from criminal investigation. It was not meant as a loophole. It was a description of the job. So here was the argument in Edward's case. Taking his guns was not a criminal investigation. It was caretaking, same as the trunk. The trial court agreed with the officers. Edward appealed. And the First Circuit Court of Appeals agreed as well. It held that community caretaking could reach inside a home. Its words were that the officers' actions, though not letter perfect, did not exceed the proper province of their community caretaking responsibilities. Think about what that rule would have meant. Caretaking has no edges. Almost anything an officer does that is not investigating a crime could be called caretaking. A rule with no edges, pointed straight at the one place the Fourth Amendment guards most closely. Edward Caniglia had now lost twice. He asked the Supreme Court to take his case. In 2020, it did. The question was narrow and enormous at the same time. Is there a standalone community caretaking exception, one that lets police enter a home without a warrant whenever they are doing something other than investigating a crime? On May 17, 2021, the court answered, no. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote the opinion. Not one justice dissented. Sit with that for a second. This is a court that disagrees about almost everything. Here, nobody did. The reasoning was simple enough to fit on a postcard. Katie was about a car. This was about a house. Thomas wrote that what is reasonable for vehicles is different from what is reasonable for homes. A car sits out on a public road. It can be driven away in seconds. It is already regulated in 100 ways. Your living room is not. And in Katie, that car was already lawfully in police hands, parked at a service station with nobody watching it. Community caretaking, the court said, was a recognition that these tasks exist. It was not an open-ended license to perform them anywhere. It was never a master key. It was a key cut for one lock. And the First Circuit had taken that key and tried it on a front door. Now, here is the part that gets left out, and it is the most important part of the whole decision. This did not stop police from ever entering your home without a warrant. There is a separate rule, and it came through completely untouched: exigent circumstances. Exigent just means urgent. If there is a genuine emergency, officers can go in. Someone screaming, a fire, a person who may be about to die. Chief Justice Roberts wrote separately to underline it. If there is an objectively reasonable basis to think someone needs medical help or faces serious danger, police can enter. Chief Justice Roberts had put the hardest version at oral argument, and Justice Alito took it up in writing. Neighbors invite an elderly woman to dinner at 6. By 8, she has not arrived and has not called. Can police go in and check on her? Alito did not answer that. He wrote that our current precedents do not address situations like this. He was flagging a hole rather than filling it, and suggesting that states might need to write procedures for exactly that case. Justice Kavanaugh went further. Officers, he wrote, may enter a home without a warrant when they are reasonably trying to prevent a potential suicide, or to help an elderly person who has been out of contact and may have fallen. So, the decision did not take away emergency entry. It took away a phrase that officers had been using instead of proving an emergency. And there is one more detail, and it quietly explains this entire case. Kavanaugh pointed out that the court never examined whether there was an emergency at Edward's house at all, because the officers never argued there was one. They disclaimed it. Their whole case rested on caretaking, which is precisely why caretaking is the thing that got taken away. Alito also listed what the decision had not settled. That included red flag laws, which let police take firearms under a court order. But that was Alito writing only for himself. The court's own opinion never mentions them at all. And now, that word, allegedly. The case reached the Supreme Court on summary judgment, which means the facts had never been tried in front of a jury. At that stage, the judges have to assume the version told by the person suing is true, so they assume the promise was made. Which means we genuinely do not know. The First Circuit noted that nothing from any of the 4 officers supported it. The court decided the case as if the promise had been made anyway, because at that stage, it had to. Edward's case went back down to the lower courts. In April of 2022, about 7 years after that night, it settled. So, what does all of this mean at your door? If officers tell you they are there for a welfare check, that by itself does not let them inside. If there is a real emergency, they are coming in, and that is lawful. If there is not, then caretaking is not the magic word. Either get a warrant or have a real emergency.